Haha, yes! God of War? More like God of Snore.
Okay, this game is kind of awesome. You know, I gotta admit, I never been a huge fan of this franchise. I like the previous games in the series, however they never stuck with me. But God of War 3 changed my perspective a little bit. And by changing my perspective, I mean showered me with so much freaking badassery, my head imploded. Epic! The old games had insane scenery as well, but with God of War 3, it's almost as if the developers amped up the awesome to 20. The amount of spectacle in this game is crazy. Like you're fighting enemies while giant titans are climbing Mount Olympus, shit's exploding. This is not sitting your ass at your old folks' home, the game. The bucket loads of epic in God of War 3 will make your balls drop off. Oh god! I'll start with the combat because it's the most integral part of the game. The actual feel of the fighting is really well put together. There's a lot of visual flair when you're laying the smackdown. Each individual hit is crunchy and powerful due to enemies reacting accordingly by flailing, ragdolling across the screen and spewing blood like sprinklers. Plus, the slight camera shake gives your attacks an extra pinch of impactfulness. There are different weapons to pick up, 7 in total, with their own individual movesets, and switching between them is available on the fly, which gives you a decent amount of room for creative play. The combat is not exactly mechanically deep per se, it's no Devil May Cry or anything, but it does have its nuances. Your dodge ability and magic spells have invincibility frames, you can use your grapple move as a gap closer, it can be quite beneficial in regards to interrupting enemies, breaking their guard, different attacks have different properties, some lift enemies in the air, some knock them away, certain weapons have faster launchers and are more focused on juggling, whereas others are more centered around pure damage. There's a parry system, there's resource management, you really need to pick and choose your moments when to cast magic spells, so yeah, it's decent when it comes to gameplay possibilities. The biggest pro to the combat is that it's visceral. Seriously, you're whooping monsters left and right. You're mauling them to death, using their buddies as battering rams. It's very satisfying. Enemies are quite varied as well. You're basically genociding every creature found in Greek mythology. And the bosses?
Kratos, your death will not be gentle one.
Epic! Personally, I'm not very keen on QuickTime events, but when the scenes accompanying the said QuickTime events are so ridiculously stupid and over the top, I can't help but smile. To add even more, God of War 3 is quite challenging. Button mashing is flushed down the toilet on later difficulties, and strategy becomes imperative. There's a combat arena, which is the go-to mode when you want to experiment with your character's full kit. Also, there's a fairly expansive selection of costumes.
Oh yes, it's very nice.
Moving on to the platforming. It's nothing to write home about really, but it does get the job done when it comes to spacing out the combat sequences. The funny thing is, Kratos is so mean that even when he's platforming, he's killing shit. The puzzles, again, are just there to spice up the campaign. However, there's one puzzle that's almost ingeniously crafted. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's very cleverly designed. As for the music, it's freaking amazing. When it needs to be quiet and subdued, it complements the scene perfectly. When it needs to let loose and go crazy, it's bombastic and fits the situation impeccably. Gameplay runs at 60 FPS with some minor drops at times. And honestly, if every PS4 game had this frame rate mixed with this type of graphical fidelity, I'd be so on board with that because visually, God of War 3 holds up really well. It doesn't look like it's aged at all. And that's all the good.
And now it's time for the not so good.
The combat lacks accuracy, and this is where I think the game would really benefit from a lock-on mechanic. Sometimes you want to prioritize on certain enemies, and Kratos just doesn't lock his focus on the ones that you want. Some mechanics are a bit inconsistent. For instance, you can knock foes off ledges with a grapple move, but there are examples when invisible walls block their way, even though there shouldn't be any. Most of your melee weapons are chain-based, even the fisticuffs have a chain aspect to them, and the reason why I think they designed the weapon weaponry like this is because for the most part people only used the Blades of Chaos in the previous games, so Santa Monica was probably like,
Fuck it! Make them all chain-based.
the majority of capabilities that are available on each individual weapon are clones of their separate counterparts. Every weapon has a crowd control move, a slow powerful singular attack. The abilities just start to repeat themselves after a while. In certain situations you're forced to use very specific strategies to get through some of the combat sequences. There's not much self-expression involved, which is fine because these are the exact moments when the resource management comes into play. But at the same time, it does raise the question, why give the player so many weapons in the first place if you're not going to encourage improvisation? This flaw becomes very apparent when it comes to battling bosses. You're not going to use any of your special attacks during these fights because of the inability to cancel out of them with either a dodge, block, or magic. Regular light and heavy attacks are the only offensive moves that you can cancel out of, and they're the ones that you're mostly going to fall back on. If not, you're setting yourself to getting shit on, especially on later difficulties where enduring a lot of punishment is not possible. But please take note, these are nitpicks. They don't break the game, because more often than not, the gameplay is pretty fucking awesome.
You know what isn't fucking awesome? Guys, what is with you freaking people?
You didn't think this shit is going to annoy the people who want to replay your game?
No.
Even Kojima and Naughty Dog with their pretentious fuckery bless you with the option to give the cinematics the middle finger.
To make it even worse, there's a lot of mini handholdy cutscenes where they show where you need to go and you can't skip any of it. Guys, I'm aware where I need to go. I'm not a lobotomized retard. Why didn't they put the option to skip all this shit? This is PS4 for fuck's sake. I'm pretty sure this machine has more RAM compared to 3.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, rant over. Anything else? Ah yes, the story. And it's, well, it ranges from being a silly cartoon to just plain cheese. But I do like Kratos as a character, actually. I know people find him kind of bland and not having any sort of characteristics other than being an angry, kill-hungry bastard, but he's also kind of funny in a non-intentional way. In God of War 3, his facial expressions are animated in such an overly exaggerated way that makes him look more goofy rather than threatening. On top of that, he has a little bit of swagger in the matter of how he talks.
What will you do, father?
He makes snarky remarks when he needs to.
Tell me, has Aphrodite conquered another god of war? That is a question you should ask your wife.
And I don't know, I guess I just like Kratos. Sure, he does awful stuff. Like, really fucking awful.
Lord Kratos, do not leave me.
Kratos, we could just go back to that room and grab a box. Okay. But, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, man.
Shit, son.
Alright, it's time to wrap up this puppy. So is God of War 3 worth getting? And I'd say yes. I mean, I had fun. The remastered version on PS4 is only €20 now. And for my rating, I give God of War 3 5 James Hetfield years out of 5. Bye! Don't forget to kill yourselves!